My father publicly shamed me at a staff meeting, sided with my incompetent brother. Now they're begging, but I gave them an answer they'd never forget. I'm a 34-year-old man now, running a high-end auto customization and restoration shop. 5 years ago, though, I was just the oldest son who couldn't seem to do anything right. My father, Rick, 62, started Carter Auto when I was still a kid. It was meant to be a family legacy. At least that's what he loved to ramble about at every backyard barbecue. I believed him. I believed him so completely that I spent 4 years at Michigan State earning a mechanical engineering degree. After that, I put in another 2 years getting specialized certifications in automotive electronics and classic car restoration, all while working weekends at the family shop for what was basically gas money.
Cars were my entire world growing up. My bedroom walls were covered with posters of the Lamborghini Countach, the Ferrari Testarossa, and the 1967 Shelby GT500. By the time I was 14, I could diagnose most engine problems just by listening to the sound they made. That all started to shift when my younger brother came into the picture. Evan, now 30, never had to jump through the same hoops.
He earned a business management degree from an online college that advertised during daytime TV, and the moment he graduated, Dad made him shop manager. No questions, no trial period, no need to prove himself. Evan couldn't tell a carburetor from a catalytic converter, but according to Dad, he had people skills and business vision. Translation: he knew how to charm customers and loved pitching big ideas that always cost more than they ever earned. Our Uncle Jack was the only one who saw through it. He ran his own small garage across town. Nothing flashy, just honest, consistent work. Watching everything unfold from the outside, he tried to warn me. "Ronnie, they're never going to see what you bring to the table," he told me once. "Not until you're gone and they actually need it." I didn't listen. I thought I could change things from within. That was my first real mistake. Jack's garage had a reputation that pulled in vintage Ferraris from 3 states away without a single advertisement. It was all word of mouth. Carter Auto, on the other hand, had big dreams but increasingly outdated practices. The shop itself had solid bones, 6 bays, decent equipment, and a prime corner location at Main and Highland. But Dad refused to invest in modern diagnostic tools or update the billing system. "We've always done it this way," might as well have been painted on the wall. Every day we lost money by turning away repairs that required specialized software or equipment we didn't have. I tried pushing for upgrades, even offered to pay for some out of my own pocket, but Dad shut me down every time. Meanwhile, Evan would suggest repainting the waiting room in brighter colors, and Dad would approve it instantly. The signs were obvious. I just chose not to read them. Everything finally came to a head during a morning staff meeting. Dad was reviewing quarterly finances with the whole team. Tony, our head mechanic, Sarah, the office manager, and Uncle Jack, who occasionally consulted on classic restorations. The numbers were bad. Revenue was down 12% compared to the same quarter the year before. Customer retention had slipped to 68%, well below the industry standard of 80%. Our cash reserves were shrinking because we'd poured money into cosmetic upgrades for the customer lounge, projects Evan insisted would elevate the brand experience. Instead of addressing any of that, Evan launched into his latest brilliant idea: opening a second location in the ritziest part of town. The entire proposal was a mess. Lease costs were astronomical. The projected customer base was wildly optimistic, and the equipment budget was missing nearly 40% of what it would realistically require. I sat quietly, taking notes. When Evan finished his PowerPoint, complete with animations that looked like a 5th grader made them, Dad asked if there were any questions. "Yeah," I said, flipping a page in my notebook. "I've got a few. The lease you're looking at is $12,500 a month, but you've budgeted $8,000. Your equipment list doesn't include an alignment rack, which alone runs at least $30,000. And your market research ignores the fact that there are already 3 high-end shops within a 5-mile radius." The room went silent. Evan rolled his eyes. "Always the pessimist," he said. Dad shot me that familiar look, the one that silently asked why I couldn't just go along with it. Uncle Jack gave a small nod, which gave me the confidence to keep going. "I'm not being pessimistic. I'm being realistic. This plan would burn through our cash reserves in 6 months max. And that's assuming we even get the customers you're projecting, which we won't." Dad slammed his hand on the table. "Enough. Your brother put a lot of work into this." I couldn't help it. I laughed. "He copy-pasted this from an SBA franchise proposal template. Look, it still has the sample text in the footer." Evan's face turned red. "At least I'm trying to grow this business instead of fixing the same old cars every day." Dad stood and pointed at me. "Your brother's thinking big. That's what this business needs, visionaries, not mechanics. The world's full of guys who can change oil and rotate tires." That one hit hard. 8 years of education, countless certifications, the custom 1967 Mustang restoration that got us featured in Auto Enthusiast magazine the year before, all of it reduced to oil changes and tire rotations. That Mustang had been my signature project. 6 months of nights and weekends resurrecting it from a rusted shell. It brought in 3 high-end clients and nearly $300,000 in revenue. And now I was just a wrench turner. I built our reputation on quality work, I said, keeping my voice steady even as my neck burned. The classic car division you pushed me to start brings in 40% of our revenue. And we appreciate that, Dad replied in a patronizing tone. But we need leadership now, not just technical skill. Uncle Jack finally spoke up. Rick, you're making a mistake. Ronnie knows what he's... I didn't ask for your input, Jack, Dad snapped. This is a family decision. I am family, Jack shot back. You know what I mean, Dad muttered before turning to me, his eyes cold. We need businessmen, not grease monkeys. You don't belong in the decision-making side of this company. The room went dead quiet. I stood slowly and gathered my notes. Where are you going? Dad asked, clearly expecting me to sit back down like I always had. If I'm just a grease monkey, I said, then I quit. I walked out immediately, ignoring my mother's gasp and Evan's smug smirk. Uncle Jack followed me into the parking lot. You're doing the right thing, he said quietly. Should have happened years ago. What the hell am I supposed to do now? I asked. Reality's settling in, he said. Come work with me, not forever, just until you figure out your next move. I nodded, too angry to say much else. That night, I packed up my apartment and crashed on Uncle Jack's couch. I was 29 years old and starting over from scratch. Part of me had always known Carter Auto wasn't my future. I just hadn't had the courage to walk away. Dad's dismissal hurt more than I expected, but it was also freeing. No more ignored input, no more watching Evan take credit, no more compromising quality to satisfy outdated standards. The next morning, I started figuring out what Ronnie Carter could build when he wasn't living in Rick Carter's shadow. Working with Uncle Jack gave me the distance I needed to finally see how twisted things had been for years. Looking back, the pattern was painfully obvious. Even the car situation said everything. Evan got a brand new Jeep when he turned 16. I got $2,000 toward a used car and had to make payments on the rest. When Evan crashed his, insurance covered the repairs without question. When mine broke down, I was told to figure it out myself because that's how you learn responsibility. The real gut punch came during my senior year of college. I'd been accepted into a prestigious automotive engineering internship with a major manufacturer. It was paid, competitive, and could have opened doors that would have completely altered my career path. But Dad called and told me they needed me at the shop because they were short-staffed. So I turned the internship down to help the family. I later found out they were never short-staffed at all. Dad just didn't want to pay to hire another mechanic for the summer. The favoritism was never subtle, but I always made excuses for it. Evan needs more support. Dad just connects with him better. At least I'm learning the technical side of the business. It was all nonsense I fed myself to survive it. The final straw came about 6 months before I quit, when I overheard a conversation between my parents late one night. They didn't know I was standing in the hallway. When I retire, Evan will take over as CEO, Dad said matter-of-factly. Ronnie can keep running the service department if he wants, but all major decisions will go through Evan. Mom's response was weak, as always. Don't you think that might upset Ronnie? He is the older one, and he's put in so much time. Ronnie's a great mechanic, Dad replied, but he doesn't have what it takes to lead. Besides, I already promised Evan. It's decided. 20 years of busting my ass, degrees, certifications, building our reputation, bringing in high-end clients. And I was going to report to my younger brother, who couldn't even balance the shop's checkbook without help. That should have been the moment I left. Instead, I stayed another 6 months hoping something would change. It didn't. Uncle Jack's shop was the complete opposite of Carter Auto. It was smaller, just 3 bays and a cramped office, but it ran like a machine. Honest work, fair pricing, clear expectations. Jack had 2 solid techs who welcomed me without hesitation. For the first month, I focused purely on the work, diagnosing problems, turning wrenches, talking directly to customers. If I told someone their car needed a new timing belt, no one questioned it or tried to upsell unnecessary services. It was refreshing. Still, I knew it wasn't a permanent solution. Jack's shop was successful by design, but intentionally limited. He never wanted to expand beyond what he could personally oversee. I respected that, but I wanted more. At night, after the shop closed, I stayed late sketching ideas for my own place. What would it look like? What services would we offer? How would it stand out among dozens of other repair shops? I kept circling back to restoration and customization. That had always been my passion, and there was a growing market for it locally that wasn't being served well. Plenty of shops could handle basic repairs, Very few had the skill, patience, or discipline for full classic restorations or high-end custom builds. The challenge was figuring out how to break in without serious capital or a reputation of my own. I needed a showcase project, something that could prove my abilities and vision in a way that spoke for itself. Jack's garage was small but dependable. Him, 2 mechanics, and a part-time receptionist. The pay wasn't great compared to what I could have made elsewhere, but it gave me breathing room to plan while keeping my hands busy. About 3 months in, an unexpected opportunity walked through the door. A client brought in a 1970 Dodge Charger that had been sitting in his barn for 30 years. It was rough, but the bones were solid. He'd gotten a quote from another restoration shop for $65,000 and nearly had a heart attack. This wasn't just any muscle car. It was a genuine RT with the Ford 26 Hemi, one of fewer than 200 ever made. Fully restored, it could be worth over $200,000. The owner, Bob Henderson, had inherited it from his uncle and remembered riding in it as a kid. He didn't have the knowledge or the funds for a top-tier restoration. "I can do it for $48,000, I told him after a full inspection, "but I'll need half up front for parts and materials." He looked at me skeptically. "That's a lot less than the other quote. What corners are you cutting?" "None," I said honestly. "I don't have their overhead, and I'll be doing most of the work myself instead of farming it out." He studied me for a moment, then nodded. "Jack vouches for you, that counts, but I want weekly updates and photos." The next day, $24,000 hit my account. I took $16,000 of it and rented a small warehouse on the edge of town, bought essential equipment, and got to work. I hired a semi-retired painter named Marcus, 40 years of experience and flexible hours. Jack let me use his lifts on Sundays when the shop was closed. That Charger became my entire world. I worked 14-hour days, 7 days a week. The engine rebuild alone took 6 weeks. Original spec parts had to be hunted down, and components that no longer existed had to be machined from scratch. I documented everything meticulously so the restoration could be certified as correct. The body required donor parts sourced from junkyards across 3 states instead of cheap reproductions. Marcus worked magic recreating the original plum-crazy purple paint that made those Chargers legendary. 6 months later, the car was flawless. When we fired it up for the first time, the sound of that Hemi echoing through the warehouse felt unreal. Bob was blown away. He brought 3 of his collector friends to see it, and within a month, I had 4 more restoration projects lined up, each high dollar, each with 50% deposits. That Charger officially launched Precision Performance. I kept overhead brutally low in those early days. I was working 80-hour weeks, sometimes sleeping on a cot in the corner of the warehouse because it didn't make sense to drive home just to come back a few hours later. Restoration projects tied up cash for months at a time, but the margins were higher, and more importantly, they allowed me to build a reputation for precision. It was risky, but it felt right. Within a year, I hired my first 3 full-time specialists. Marcus stayed on for paint work. Diego came aboard next, a quiet guy who was an absolute wizard with wiring and modern electronics. The third was Tom, an upholstery expert who could recreate any interior from scratch, right down to factory stitching patterns and materials that hadn't been produced in decades. Uncle Jack consulted on complex engine builds, bringing his 35 years of experience into the shop whenever I needed another set of seasoned eyes. We were still operating out that original warehouse, slowly upgrading it as cash allowed. Better lighting, a small customer lounge, a dedicated clean room for engine assembly. It wasn't glamorous, but it worked. Clients appreciated the no-frills approach. They cared about craftsmanship, not Italian espresso machines or leather couches in the waiting area. That was when I met Ryan Matthews. Ryan was 40, a tech entrepreneur with more money than time and a deep obsession with resto mods, classic cars rebuilt with modern performance. He showed up one afternoon with a rusted-out 1965 Mustang shell on a trailer and a simple request. "Make it look classic," he said, "but make it perform like a supercar. Budget's $175. This was a completely different level of challenge. The Mustang needed a custom chassis, modern suspension geometry, upgraded brakes, and a contemporary drivetrain that could deliver insane performance without ruining the vintage aesthetic. I spent weeks just on the design phase, building detailed 3D models and running performance simulations before we cut a single piece of metal. Ryan stayed involved the entire time, refining the vision with me as we went. The build took 9 months from start to finish. We replaced the original 289 V8 with a modern Coyote 5.0 crate engine, pushing 460 horsepower. We paired it with a 6-speed manual transmission, completely reworked the suspension, and installed Brembo brakes at all 4 corners. Externally, the car stayed largely stock, with subtle changes to accommodate wider tires and improved cooling. The final result was everything we'd hoped for. The car was featured in 3 automotive magazines and won Best Resto Mod at a major show. Ryan was thrilled. More than that, he became an unofficial ambassador for Precision Performance, sending wealthy friends my way and eventually stepping in as a silent investor when I was ready to grow. By the end of year 2, we had a 10-month waiting list and outgrew the warehouse. I moved Precision Performance into a proper 15,000 square foot facility. One of my first hires there was Tony, the former head mechanic from my father's shop. I offered him $20,000 more per year than he was making, plus profit sharing. Dad never knew I was the one who hired him away. Tony brought invaluable insight with him. Carter Auto's pricing model, vendor relationships, workflow bottlenecks, and customer frustrations. I never used that information to directly compete with my father's shop, but it helped me avoid repeating their mistakes. I stayed locked into what I did best, taking historically significant cars and making them exceptional, whether through faithful restoration or thoughtful modernization, and I refused to offer any service I couldn't deliver perfectly. The next major shift came when I met Sophia Reeves. She was a marketing consultant who specialized in luxury brands. She showed up at the shop with her brother, who was picking up his restored BMW 2002, and immediately started asking questions about how we operated. Sophia wasn't what I expected from someone in marketing. She'd worked with high-end watchmakers, boutique hotels, and custom furniture designers, businesses built on craftsmanship, not volume. "You have something special here," she told me bluntly, "but hardly anyone knows about it." I pushed back. "I don't want to be just another shop, quality over quantity." She shook her head. "I'm not talking about quantity, I'm talking about perception. You're doing premium level work, charging upper middle rates, and marketing yourself like a neighborhood garage." After some hesitation, I hired her as a consultant. She completely transformed our image. New branding, a refined logo, a high-end website, and a strategic media presence. Our waiting list jumped to 14 months, and I raised rates by 30% without losing demand. That was when Sophia introduced me to Daniel Kang. Daniel had been an operations executive for a luxury automaker. After one walkthrough of our facility, he didn't sugarcoat anything. "Your craftsmanship is exceptional," he said, "but your processes are killing your margins." I brought him on as CEO, offering equity instead of a massive salary. It was one of the best decisions I ever made. Daniel streamlined everything, cutting turnaround times by 25% without sacrificing quality. One of his first changes was implementing a real inventory management system. Before that, we ordered parts as needed, often paying premium prices for rush shipping. Daniel built forecasting models based on our project pipeline, allowing us to order in bulk and negotiate better supplier terms. He also reorganized workflow, applying principles from high-end manufacturing. Instead of each specialist working in isolation, he created project teams that moved through builds together. Communication improved, errors dropped, clients were happier. With Sophia shaping our image and Daniel running operations, I finally got to focus on what I loved most, the cars, and on training the next generation of restoration specialists. We launched an apprenticeship program with local technical colleges, bringing in young talent eager to learn the craft the right way. I never imagined myself as a teacher, but it turned out to be one of the most rewarding parts of the job. Watching a 19-year-old kid grow from total beginner into a skilled craftsman was incredibly satisfying. By year 4, we opened a second location in Arizona, focusing on rust-free classics from the Southwest. A year later, we expanded into Florida. Every shop followed the same standards, the same attention to detail, the same refusal to cut corners. Around that time, I started hearing through the grapevine that things weren't going well at Carter Auto. Dad had gone through with Evan's expansion plan, opening that second location in the expensive part of town. It lasted 9 months before they broke the lease, losing more than $120,000. Evan blamed market conditions. I knew better. They lost 3 experienced mechanics after Tony left, replacing them with cheaper, less skilled labor. Quality slipped. Complaints piled up. One former Carter customer told me they'd had his Mercedes for 3 weeks trying to fix an electrical issue. Another said they'd been quoted $3,200 for a timing belt job that should have cost half that. Uncle Jack kept me updated now and then, though he'd mostly distanced himself after Dad disrespected him at that last meeting. "They're still afloat," he told me during one of our monthly fishing trips, "but they're taking on water fast." I nodded and cast my line again. I had my own ship to steer. In my 5th year, Precision Performance crossed $8.2 million in annual revenue across all locations. We had 47 specialists on payroll, a growing online following, and a reputation as one of the top restoration shops in the country. The real validation came when Classic Car Collector named us U.S. Restoration Shop of the Year after our historically accurate restoration of a rare 1956 Mercedes-Benz 300 SL Gullwing. The article described our work as museum quality, and referred to me as a mechanical artist rather than just a mechanic. That 18-month project pushed every limit we had, and the finished car was so precise that Mercedes-Benz themselves acknowledged it as one of the finest examples still in existence. I framed that article, not out of ego, but as a reminder of what happens when you refuse to compromise your standards. Around that time, Ryan, my tech entrepreneur client turned investor, started talking to me about diversification. "You've built something incredible," he said, "but it's still dependent on you being here every day. You need to think about what comes next." He was right. Restoration work was deeply rewarding, but it had limits. Projects took months, required massive upfront costs, and could only be scaled so far without risking quality. If I wanted long-term stability, I needed additional revenue streams. We started by launching a reproduction parts division focused on rare classics. Unlike the cheap replicas flooding the market, our parts were indistinguishable from originals in materials, tolerances, and finish. What began as a side project quickly grew into a 7-figure business, with orders coming in from restoration shops all over the world. Daniel also proposed creating detailed digital records of our restoration processes. Those evolved into a subscription-based database for DIY restorers and small shops. It became an invaluable resource for technicians tackling complex projects they wouldn't have attempted otherwise. Through all the growth and expansion, I held on to one non-negotiable principle: never sacrifice quality. Every car that left our shop had to be flawless, or it didn't leave at all. Deadlines didn't matter. Client status didn't matter. That reputation became our greatest asset. The acquisition offers started coming in soon after. Large automotive groups and private investors floated 8-figure buyouts that would have set me up for life. Some were tempting, but I remembered what happened when my father chose growth over craftsmanship. I wasn't going to repeat that mistake. The call came on a Wednesday afternoon. I was reviewing designs for a custom carbon fiber dashboard on a Ferrari project when my assistant buzzed in. "There's Elisa Carter on line 1, she said. "She says she's your mother." 5 years of silence, and now she was calling out of nowhere. I considered letting it go to voicemail, but curiosity won. "Hello, Mom," I said evenly. "Ronnie," she replied, her voice tight. "How are you?" "I'm doing well. What can I help you with?" 30 seconds of stiff small talk passed before she got to the point. "Your father had a heart attack last week. He's stable, but he'll need bypass surgery. I'm sorry to hear that. I hope he recovers quickly. There's more," she continued. "The business, it's not doing well. Evan made some decisions that didn't work out. I'd already heard through industry contacts that Carter Auto was close to bankruptcy. Rapid expansion, heavy debt, and cutting corners on quality had taken their toll." "What kind of decisions?" I asked, even though I already suspected the answer. "He took out loans to open 2 more locations. Neither is profitable. And there was a problem with a repair on a customer's Porsche. They're suing us for $225,000. A lawsuit over a Porsche repair meant something catastrophic had gone wrong. Porsche owners don't tolerate mistakes, and they can afford the lawyers to prove it." "And what exactly are you hoping I'll do?" I asked. There was a long pause. "We need your help, Ronnie. The bank is threatening to call in the loans. We could lose everything, including the house." "Everything?" I repeated. "Yes," she whispered. I told her I'd think about it and ended the call. 20 minutes later, Evan called. Unlike Mom, he skipped the pleasantries. "Look, I know things haven't been great between us," he said, "but this is about family." "Is it?" I replied coldly, because I remember being told I wasn't part of the decision-making family. He sighed like I was being unreasonable. "Dad was wrong to say that. We all know it. But right now, we need your help. You've built an incredible business, and we're drowning. What do you want from me, Evan? We need a loan to get through the next few months until we can sell the new locations." "How much?" $300,000. I actually laughed. "You want me to loan you $300,000 after everything that happened?" "It would be a legitimate business loan," he insisted, "with interest. And we'll put the original shop up as collateral." "The shop that's about to be foreclosed on?" I asked. He didn't answer. "I'll come by tomorrow," I said finally. Before making any decision, I had my lawyer dig into the Porsche lawsuit. It was real and ugly. They'd tried to rebuild the PDK transmission on a 911 GT3, something that should have gone straight back to Porsche. They botched it badly, causing over $180,000 in engine and drivetrain damage. My attorney said any settlement under $250,000 would be considered a win. I built that risk into my plan. Afterward, I called Uncle Jack. "So they finally swallowed their pride," he said when I explained. "How bad is it really?" I asked. He sighed. "Worse than they're admitting. Evan's been cooking the books to hide losses from your dad. There are tax liens, angry customers, and 3 mechanics threatening lawsuits over unpaid wages." "What am I going to do?" I asked. Jack didn't hesitate. "You already know. I'm going to help them, I said slowly, but on my terms. He wasn't surprised. He knew I wouldn't let the business my grandfather started disappear entirely, even if my father and brother had nearly destroyed it. That night, I stayed up running numbers. By dawn, I had a plan. The next morning, I walked into Carter Auto for the first time in 5 years. The place felt smaller somehow, and noticeably shabbier. What shocked me most wasn't the faded paint or worn furniture, but the condition of the shop floor. Tools were scattered everywhere instead of being put away. Oil stains covered the concrete. 2 of the lifts had out-of-order signs taped to them. The pride my father once took in keeping a clean, professional workspace was completely gone. Dad was already there. He looked older than I remembered, frailer. His skin had a gray cast, and he moved slowly, still clearly recovering from the heart attack. But when he saw me, that same stubborn pride flickered in his eyes. Evan stepped out of the back office wearing an ill-fitting suit, like a kid playing dress-up as a businessman. "Ronnie, thanks for coming," he said. "Let's talk in the office." For the next 2 hours, I went through their books line by line. I asked direct questions that made Evan shift uncomfortably in his chair. The situation was exactly as bad as Uncle Jack had warned, maybe worse. They were over $420,000 in debt, not the $300,000 Evan had claimed. They were 90 days behind on parts payments. The bank was threatening to seize equipment. Customer retention had dropped to 42%, meaning more than half of first-time customers never came back. Their online reputation was a disaster, 2.1 stars on Google. Reviews said things like overpriced and underdelivered, and took my car in for an oil change and left with more problems than I came in with. When I closed the ledger, Evan leaned forward. "So, can you help us?" "Yes," I said after a long pause, "but not with a loan." His eyebrows shot up. "Then what?" "I'll buy the business." The words hung in the air. "Buy it?" Dad finally spoke, his voice tight. "This is a family business." "It's a failing business," I replied evenly. "One that'll be gone in 60 days if someone doesn't stop the bleeding. I'm offering a lifeline." He scoffed. "You think you're the savior now, just because you built your little hobby shop?" "That hobby shop made $8 million last year," I said flatly. "And it's on track to do even better." Dad pushed himself up, trying to look authoritative even though his old shop jacket now hung loosely on his frame. "This place has my name on it." I met his gaze. Not for long. He opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. Evan finally broke the silence. "Dad, he's right. We don't have a choice." I laid out the deal. "I'll assume the $420,000 in debt. I'll also inject $100,000 in cash. You both stay on salary as consultants for 1 year while we transition operations. After that, you're out." "That's insulting," Dad snapped. "No," I said calmly. "What you did to this business was insulting. I'm just fixing it." Evan swallowed. "Can we have time to think?" "You have 48 hours, I said, standing up. "After that, I'll be too busy cleaning up my own mess instead of someone else's." I left them sitting there in stunned silence. 2 days later, my lawyer called. They'd accepted the offer. The transition went smoother than I expected. Carter Auto was absorbed into Precision Performance. We kept the original location but upgraded everything, from diagnostic equipment to the coffee machine. I retained most of the staff, gave them proper training, and raised wages to reflect actual skill and experience. We shut down for 2 weeks to renovate and put everyone through intensive retraining. Dad consulted for 3 months before his health forced him to step back. Evan stayed the full year, watching quietly as the business stabilized and then improved. The shop went from losing $30,000 a month to breaking even by month 4 and turning a profit by month 6. It took 70-hour weeks, rebuilt supplier relationships, and a tiered service model Carter Auto had never even considered. The real satisfaction came during the grand reopening. The entire facility had been renovated, and I invited former customers back for an open house. Many recognized me immediately and were vocal about how much better the shop felt. "You really saved this place," one longtime customer said, standing right in front of Dad and Evan. It was going downhill fast. I'd actually started taking my BMW somewhere else. Dad's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Later that night, after the crowd cleared out, Evan approached me in the new customer lounge. He looked exhausted. "I really thought I could do it," he said quietly. "Run the business like Dad." I poured him a coffee from the new espresso machine. That was the problem, trying to be like Dad. He built this place through hard work, but he stopped evolving. "You can't keep doing the same thing and expect different results." Evan nodded slowly. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry for how things went down before." "I know," I said, and I meant it. Evan was never really the enemy. He was just the favored son who'd never had to face consequences until now. A few weeks later, I offered him a sales position at our main location, not out of charity, but because I genuinely believed he could excel there with the right structure. To my surprise, he accepted, and even more surprisingly, he thrived. Evan turned out to be excellent at building relationships with high-end clients when he wasn't responsible for operations. Dad was the last holdout. The final vindication came a year later when Classic Car Collector featured us in a family business issue. They interviewed both of us about the merger. To Dad's credit, he told the truth. "Ronnie saw what I couldn't," he said. "That craftsmanship matters more than expansion." He built precision performance from nothing because he believed in doing things the right way, not the fast way. Taking over Carter Auto wasn't revenge. It was redemption. Progress doesn't come in leaps. It comes in deliberate steps. When I think back to the day Dad said, "We need businessmen, not grease monkeys," I realize it might have been the best thing that ever happened to me. It forced me to build something on my own terms. The lesson wasn't really about cars or business. It was about having the courage to walk away from what doesn't value you and the determination to build something better in its place.